What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of China Update, where I provide you guys with the most up-to-date political, economic, and geostrategic analysis on the world's number 2 economy. My name is Tony. Let's jump in. Okay, happy Saturday, everybody. I hope you're all having a wonderful weekend. General Secretary Xi Jinping's most prominent public remarks at the National People's Congress this week, part of the 2 sessions, has focused on food and energy security, themes he has long favored, but which now have much greater resonance as oil and commodity prices spiral upwards. We touched on food security earlier in the week, so now let's touch on energy security policy. Based on the speech of Premier Li Keqiang at the opening of the National People's Congress, we learned this week that China has declined to set a new hard target for energy use and will focus on securing fuel supplies, moving away from the traditional metric of energy consumption per unit of GDP. In light of the power crisis China suffered in the winter of last year and what the war in Ukraine has done to global commodity markets and prices, it was only a matter of time before China backed off hard carbon reduction targets and focused more on energy security. Indeed, the poorly managed rollout of carbon reduction measures at several localities across the country was one of the main causes of the power shortages last year. We know too, of course, that China relies on imports for its energy needs, much like the rest of East Asia, and especially Japan. Its biggest oil suppliers are in the Middle East, meaning long and very vulnerable supply lines which pass India, the Malacca Strait, and the South China Sea. Both Li Keqiang and Xi Jinping have this week spoken about the need to ensure food and energy security, quote, including stepping up drilling and mining for oil, gas, and coal, and improving national stockpiles. End quote. The powerful National Development and Reform Commission in a report said that China must, quote, retain an appropriate level of flexibility, both providing reasonable leeway for energy consumption to ensure the steady performance of the economy and urging local governments to maintain their energy conservation efforts. End quote. So we should expect more policy rollout in this direction in the coming months, or maybe even sooner. For example, on Thursday, Saudi Arabia's state oil company, Saudi Arabian Oil Co., announced that it is resuming a $10 billion refining and petrochemicals joint venture that was suspended nearly 2 years ago. The project, with a 300,000 barrels a day refinery, will be built in Liaoning province, northeast China, and is set to start operation in 2024. China's state-owned defense company, China North Industries Group Corp, holds 36% of the joint venture, followed by Aramco's 35%, and a local city-backed enterprise owns the rest. We also remember before the Ukraine invasion, Vladimir Putin and several top state-owned oil executives visited Beijing just before the Winter Olympic Games and signed a bunch of deals for Russian energy supplies to China. Now, of course, with the ongoing conflict in Ukraine, this may still be up in the air, but it's worth noting the timing. Okay, next up, yesterday, Friday, the People's Bank of China, China's central bank, announced data which surprised even already pessimistic economists and analysts. In February, banks lent 1.2 trillion RMB, just shy of $200 billion US, down from 4 trillion RMB in January, and less than in February of last year. But when we dig deeper into the data, it confirms what we have been saying about household demand for housing for at least the last few months. A key indicator of home mortgages declined for the first time in at least 15 years, dropping by 49.5 billion RMB in February, month on month, despite what several analysts have expressed efforts by the central bank and other financial institutions to boost borrowing by cutting rates and lowering down payments. Last month, we had several videos looking at moves by local governments to make financing for households more accessible. It seems that these efforts have had very little effect. This all, of course, confirms that the Evergrande property crisis is both a supply crisis, a supply-side crisis, as well as a demand-side crisis, and that increased credit and modest government spending increases, including the front-loading of infrastructure spending, has not done the trick. Beijing now either has to dramatically increase stimulus in the property sector or in the wider construction sector like in infrastructure, undermining deleveraging efforts, increasing debt and kicking the problem down the road a few more years, or try to ride what would likely be a very painful correction in property prices and a crash in the housing development industry. Now, let's turn back to Friday's data. Yesterday, Zhou Hao, senior emerging markets economist at Commerzbank AG, expressed, quote, "It's a pretty bad set of data. There's a lack of a growth driver and the real economy's demand is weak. The People's Bank of China will have to cut rates early if it wants to do so." End quote. An economist with Bloomberg Intelligence expressed, quote, "China's limp credit expansion in February reinforces our view that the People's Bank of China needs to and will loosen policy further to shore up the economy." End quote. And analysts with Bloomberg's Hong Kong team expressed, quote, "The data underscores the challenge for China to achieve its target of 5.5% growth this year, with the property market slumping, coronavirus infections rapidly increasing, inflation still high, and export demand threatened by the effects of the war in Europe." End quote. Okay, next up, this week there has been a state media-led narrative blitz around the theme, quote, "The United States has once again exposed its true colors as an empire of lies," end quote. As always, when we see a new major theme presented in state media, it's worth examining what narratives are being presented to a domestic audience, especially since in the current environment, many middle-level, especially policymakers, but also higher policymakers, tend to believe these narratives. So we do have to look at these narratives being presented. As always, the state media narratives speak for themselves. Let's go through some of them here from one article from state-run Xinhua this week. Quote, "In order to let American lies into the mind and heart, the United States has systematically implemented American deception for a long time. It carefully waves a binary narrative of either or, employing media, film and television, and academic channels to install ideological slogans into the minds of people in target countries and regions in a comprehensive manner, and guide people to observe the world and think about issues according to the needs of the US side. The army of public opinion is carefully cultivated to cover the lies with academic research, independent investigation, mainstream media, and victims to deceive people's trust and sympathy. For some time now, the US has been targeting China and constantly fabricating and spreading China-related lies in the international media. The US government, some political groups, and media platforms have played a shameful role in this. On Xinjiang-related issues, the US government spread rumors in an organized and planned way. News organizations managed by the US Agency for Global Media produced false Xinjiang-related reports in dozens of languages and coordinated with allied media organizations to republish and post them. Facts are the magic mirror for exposing lies. What the US has done has repeatedly run counter to basic international rules and the good faith of human conscience. Its false claims have been solemnly refuted by far-sighted people around the world. The more the US side talks nonsense and makes groundless claims, the more it exaggerates and embellishes, the more it will increase the deficit of its national credit account, and the empire of lies will eventually fall into complete bankruptcy. End quote. It's worth mentioning Russian state media and leader Vladimir Putin have also used the phrase empire of lies in the past, raising questions of coordination. And finally, let's end with a very important but often overlooked player in East Asia and in East Asian politics, South Korea. By the way, guys, if you're enjoying the content, As always, it's a huge help if you hit the like button. If you're watching for the first time and you're enjoying the content, you're getting some value from it, maybe consider subscribing. But also, while we're on South Korea, I try not to insert my own personal opinion into the content, but if you guys will indulge me, if anyone ever has the opportunity to visit South Korea, I would highly recommend spending 3 or 4 days, or trying to find 3 or 4 days, and visiting South Korea, especially the capital of Seoul. It's a very underrated city in Asia. It's one of my favorite cities to visit in all of Asia. It has wonderful people, it's great music scene and food, and has wonderful hiking and mountain climbing tracks. It's a very creative and innovative and vibrant democracy. So I'd highly recommend the city to anyone who's in that part of the world. It's a wonderful place to visit. Anyway, let's jump back into the content. Security analysts both within and outside China are arguing that South Korea's new president-elect, Yoon Suk-yeol, may adopt a hardline approach towards China by aligning further with the United States over regional security concerns. For example, Chinese outlet Caixin writes that Yoon, a conservative former top prosecutor who was elected South Korea's next president on Thursday, returns the conservatives to power after 5 years and, quote, may represent a shift from the country's ambiguous foreign policies towards China under the outgoing president, end quote. In an article published by the United States magazine Foreign Affairs in February, Yoon criticized the current Moon administration for being too close to China at the expense of their alliance with the United States. South Korean media reports too that Yoon wants closer ties with Washington and more coordinated China policy and more cooperation on diplomatically sensitive projects like the Terminal High Altitude Area Defense THAAD anti-missile system, which China strongly opposes, hitting South Korea with harsh economic measures the last time Seoul considered installing it. Indeed, the sanctions cost South Korea an estimated $7.5 billion in economic losses at the end of 2020, or by the end of 2020. Yoon is also interested in the four-nation Quad, which China also strongly opposes, viewing it correctly as a grouping designed to counter China's growing influence in the Asia-Pacific. Yoon may talk the talk on the campaign trail, however walking the walk after coming to power is another thing, so we have to see what the first few months of his administration look like before we make any conclusions regarding his China policy and what it means for the broader China-US competition in the region. And of course, the same basic dynamics restricting Seoul's policy space remain: a deeply complex and dangerous geopolitical environment with a hostile North Korea, a location between China and Japan. The US is South Korea's security patron, however China is its largest market. Also, deep social and cultural views between South Korea and Japan and South Korea and China also complicate the political environment in Seoul, a vibrant democracy, an environment that Washington policymakers have difficulty navigating at times. Now, speaking to an American audience in January, Yoon expressed, quote, South Korea and the United States share an alliance forged in blood as we fought together to protect freedom against the tyranny of communism, end quote. Hey guys, I'd love to hear what you thought about some of the updates we covered in today's episode, so throw your comments below. Always love hearing from you. Thank you for watching. I'll see you next time.